Sales Queens Claim Your Career Crown podcast. And I'm your host, Lynn Whitbeck, the Strategic Sales Queen. And today I'm joined by our very special guest, Jen Mueller. And we've got a really great conversation. And you're going to go, oh, okay, this makes sense. We're going to be talking about game changing conversation strategies, changing the conversation seconds at a time. Because here's the thing. Poor communication habits can silently derail your relationships and career. Overcoming this can feel tricky, but today's guest, Jen, has simple strategies to turn any conversation around in seconds. And I want to remind you, if you love the show and you love this episode, go ahead and click those 5 stars for a review and, subscribe to the show. Now, let me tell you a little bit, because it's no surprise that Jen Mueller pursued a career in sports broadcasting. After all, sports fits her competitive nature and broadcasting fits her skill set. Jen spent 19 years with the Seattle Mariners TV's broadcast team and is in her 17th season of Super Bowl champions, the Seattle Seahawks radio sidelines. Jen is a skilled interviewer with a heart for people, sought after keynote speaker, and the host of I Cook, You Measure, sharing strategies to build stronger connections. Jen, I'm really thrilled and excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Lynn. I always love a chance to talk about talking. And of course, the Seahawks being Super Bowl champs, well, that just gives us another reason to talk and to celebrate.
I know. I should have worn my Seahawk green today.
There's plenty of time all year long. They'll be part of the conversation all year
blue
long.
Blue or green, right?
Yep.
I actually have a top that would have worked. Anyway, I really want to get some backstory on this. I mean, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you and learning more about you, but I actually don't think I really got into all of the backstory about what got you started in sports broadcasting and interviewing.
Well, I was always an athlete through high school. I am super competitive. I went to college with the idea of being a broadcaster. And that's because a high school guidance counselor nudged me in that direction. I was thinking about teaching. She was thinking about broadcasting. And once she planted that seed and I started going down that road, I realized sports is what I talked about most often. And it was way more fun than talking about some of the other things you could be broadcasting about. So every class that I took, every project, every job that I worked in college had something to do with sports. At the time, women were being allowed to try it. We weren't necessarily supported or encouraged in that. And so as they type a planner, there was a backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan. But what you figure out when you go through broadcasting school is that it's not really about being on TV. There's a reason that people like TV versus radio versus podcasting, but it's actually not about the airtime or having your face seen. It's how you prefer to tell stories. And I prefer to tell stories by talking to the players who were involved in the game and letting them tell me from their perspective what happened on a certain play, on a drive, at a finish for a season. And I've taken that and I've done those same things with the clients that I work with in the corporate space. But that's really where that love of people and interviewing came from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I share your enthusiasm. I love interviewing people because I actually get to learn something too.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's a great way to really, celebrate them as well and to hear it from their perspective, just like, what we saw on the TV or on the
Yep.
field, even if you're in the stands versus them being actually boots on the ground. So, I really want to dig into the other side of what you do and what's the problem you help people solve with your conversation strategies.
Yeah, I would say I help high performing teams find an edge in the conversations that they're already having during the course of the day. We overlook a lot of things when we are having business conversations that I can't afford to overlook when I am on TV or radio because it's happening in real time. It's happening on a very tight timeline. There is a deadline, and there are certain things that have to happen just a few seconds at a time. And so I am pointing out ways to be more effective, not just by doing more, but by truly communicating effectively and all these little interactions that we tend to overlook.
Yeah. No, and there is, I mean, I've got your book, of course, and books, I should say. And one of the things that I've seen is that sometimes, and I've always experienced this, people aren't direct, or
Mm,
they're pussyfooting around something, or the way they phrase something or the words they used are misconstrued or misunderstood by somebody else because there isn't a piece of clarity
yep.
there. And so, one of the things that um, I like about, what I've been exposed to from you is, that I don't want to say cut to the chase, but it is about being more direct and having the clarity. And that doesn't mean that you're not kind. And it
Right.
doesn't mean that you're not compassionate, but you're you're eliminating those gaps. Does that make sense?
Yes. And you are making it easy to reach your objective. I think a lot of times we go into conversations, heck, we go into meetings and we don't really know what the objective is. We know we need to make a connection or we know we need to get a piece of information, but we don't drill down to figure out what the objective is to a specific conversation that we're having or a specific question that we're asking. And when we don't do the work ahead of time, it just kind of muddies the waters and it makes it really difficult to have a productive conversation, but it makes it hard for people to actually respond to you. And they don't know what the answer is supposed to be. To your point, if you're not as clear or if you're not as direct, I really don't know what it is that you're looking for. And we see this all the time. And there's examples in the way that we greet each other and approach small talk. There's also examples in sports. If you were to say, tell me what happened in the seventh inning, I would hope my athlete turns around and says, what do you want to know about the seventh inning? Do you want to know about the top of the inning, the bottom of the inning, the pitching change? Do you want to know about the offense? Do you want to know about the defensive play? Do you want to know about the delay that was happening because of the injury on the mound? There's too many things. I don't know what it is that you're trying to get me to say. Very different
Yeah.
response if I say, what happened with two runners on, two outs when he threw the fastball inside? There's only one answer to that question. And part of this goes back to conventional wisdom. We think that when we ask open ended questions, we have created the best conversation possible. And what we've
Yeah.
actually done is created a lot of confusion. And we've put up roadblocks to communicating effectively because I don't know what it is that you're looking for in those moments.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes to me, I found that you can start a little bit broad, but then you've got to keep asking, well, because sometimes you're not sure, you're going to start the conversation, you're going to start in a direction, and it's like, okay, tell me more. I'm curious about that. Help me understand. And so that then you get more information. And now you start to drill down, and then what's the next question you should be asking. I always think it's like being a detective.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. And even as a detective, though, you know what those three pieces of information are that you were asking about, right?
that you're
We
trying to
don't
get to.
we don't play a game of 20 questions just for the sake of playing 20 questions, right? And I know that that's not what you're saying, but just for the listeners and the viewers, right? Because that gets awkward. And this is what happens in small talk. And this is why people think small talk is a waste of time. Because small talk generally starts with this exchange. How are you? To which you would say, I'm,
I'm great.
and then you would say to me,
How are you?
and I would say, I'm great. And then we both sit there and we look at each other, hoping that somebody says something interesting. When
Yeah.
what we just did was ask the biggest, broadest, most open ended question we could possibly ask. Except that I will tell you, I've done this with corporate audiences for almost 20 years. every single person in the audience says good or great.
Yeah.
95% of the respondents, right? And so that's an example of you don't really know what you're trying to get out of the conversation. You're just following the script. If,
Yeah.
however, you can get to the next question right away and it cuts to the chase, now I'm not hunting and pecking for the next thing. I'm a little bit more efficient and I put everybody at ease by just asking the next direct question.
Yeah. No, I mean, and those are I know that when I do like networking events or things like that, I actually will start with something more like, yeah, what brought you here today? What
Mhm.
was the
Yep.
big motivation of
Yep.
why you wanted to come and be in this room? So
Yeah.
I'm actually asking them a little bit something that really helped me trigger, like, well, why did they decide to come? Why did they want to be here? And sometimes I'll also ask a question to learn a little bit more about them, sort of flipping the script. It'll be like, Jen, if you were anywhere else right now, and you could be anywhere else, where would you be? What would you be doing? And who would you be with? And I ask that because then I learn something about you personally, because
Yeah.
you might say, hey, I'd be hiking in Yosemite with my dog. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But
You know what I love about the question, though, Lynn, when you flip it around, the first one that you offered, and you said, what motivated you to be in this room right now? I love that question because motivate is a very, very specific outcome that you are looking
yeah,
for. And motivate elicits an emotion in me to give you a good response because I promise there is a story behind that. Right? You didn't
yeah,
just ask a question. You set the stage for a story and you didn't do it by going off script. There's
yeah,
a reason that we all follow the script of how are you? It's very comfortable. It's normal. It's not productive, but it's
yeah,
comfortable and it's normal. And if you get too far outside of that, people get uncomfortable and they don't know what to say and they freeze up and they're again afraid to disappoint you by giving the wrong answer. But you've got this very adjacent question that is right in my train of thought. I already know why I'm there that day. And I think that that's a brilliant way to get into the conversation. And it's a perfect example of how you take the initial question and you tweak it just a little bit to reach the specific objective that you are looking for.
yeah. And it's hard. You have to really fight this social convention not to say, "Hey, how are you doing today?"
Yeah.
And I mean, because I just like don't say that, just
Yeah.
and so I've sort of got a couple things that I will say instead to try to get the conversation moving a different
Yep.
direction, to really get to know them a little bit better, to understand, like why did they come?
Yeah.
What's in it for them? What are they hoping for?
Yep.
And that really helps then find common ground quicker and be able to also provide value in the conversation. So I want to drill down and how you do this when you're working with people. And because obviously I've got my own thing, which is great, but do you have a specific process or approach, or how do you help people get past that? How are you?
Well, I do have a couple of approaches for how are you. And here's what I tell people about that interaction just to drive home the point that we need to be more strategic and intentional around this, which means we are going to need to practice this ahead of time. Otherwise, we're going to revert back to saying the same thing.
Yeah.
This is the most pivotal moment in every single conversation. It is not when you get to the big stuff. The big stuff is that moment right there, because that is where you get to direct the question to wherever it is you want the conversation to go. Whether that is making somebody feel comfortable, whether that is finding out something about them and why they showed up to the networking event, or it is giving people that insight into you that matters to your audience. So I always recommend that people have a success statement at the ready. And a success statement is a one sentence response to the question, how are you? That answers the question, but it goes one step further. And when you go one step further, we're not offering a sales pitch, we're not offering marketing copy. We're just giving one more sentence that shines the light on something that you want to talk about and or something that you are proud of. So, I might answer that question, especially if I was in a group where I was networking and I wanted them to know what I was up to. I might say, I'm awesome. I just finished a set of PowerPoints for a presentation I'm giving next week. And I just learned my cooking show got the highest rated marks since I started the shows. To me, there are two things that I am proud of. Number one, I'm proud that the most recent episode of the cooking show, this is true, got the highest numbers of any episode since I've launched it. And number two, I'm proud that I've got clients that I'm speaking to and that I finished the PowerPoint presentation, right? And now you can ask me about either one of those things. But even if you don't, I used a very small window of time, less than 15 seconds, to convey what was important to me.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I love that. I'm gonna I don't know how I missed this from I'm gonna make sure that I adopt that at the next networking event that I'm gonna be at. So because it really gives people a direction to go in. And if somebody answers that, oh well, tell me what tell me about your TV show. Tell me
Right.
about your cooking show. I mean, for me, that's immediate because I love to cook and I'm going like, oh wow, okay. I
Yes.
haven't watched that. Last flight I was on for a speaking engagement, I watched all of the Ina Gartner, the Barefoot Contessa
Oh,
shows
yeah.
on, and it was like giving me these good ideas.
Yeah.
I was afterwards, I was going, I need to find one of her, buy a cookbook. And I went, why, Lynn? Stop buying cookbooks. I've
I
actually been
know.
trying to shed them, because but
I
it
always
was
feel
fun.
like I need a grocery shopping list and a grocery shopping day after I watch cooking shows.
Oh, I
Yes.
know. But it was really fun. Anyway, we're not gonna digress there. Let's move on. So what
No, we could keep going down that road, but we're going to stay on track over here.
Yeah. So, why is having effective conversation skills such a challenge for so many people? I mean, I got to ask.
I think it's because we don't have the opportunities to self scout in business opportunities the way that we do in television. I think I'm in a very unique position because every time I do an interview, and for years, like 2 decades of this, we don't just do the interview and let the interview sit. We go back and transcribe it word for word and you time code it out. Now, AI has made this easier. There are now
Yeah.
programs that you can run it through, but for years, it was my job to sit there and listen to how I asked the question, the response I got back. Now, what I was really doing was transcribing so that we could cut these into sound bites and use
Yeah.
them in, sportscast and television shows and on radio programs and all of these things. But what you learn as a result is how people are responding to the conversation. And it turned into a lot of self scouting for me because I could see their reaction. And sometimes I didn't catch it in real time because I was so focused on what I
Yeah.
was trying to do. I totally missed the fact that they were confused, but I could hear it in the response. And then I could go back and I could do it again with another athlete and see, okay, that made a big difference. I could talk to people afterwards and figure out what worked and what didn't. And that was always my job because in broadcasting, we measure conversations in seconds, not minutes. And so I don't have a chance to miss on a question. I don't have a chance to ease my way into a conversation. You better be on it from the get go. Otherwise, you just missed a really big opportunity. I think in a lot of our day to day conversations, number one, they're not being recorded, transcribed, and reviewed for our self scouting, as we would say in sports. I think the other part is we fall into the idea of thinking that more is better. I mean, I think we've all had somebody that says we need to communicate more. My former manager at the TV station said it all the time: more communication, we need to communicate more. And I would have to say, John, that's not helpful because
Yeah.
more of the same thing that's not working doesn't do anything. We
Yeah.
need to be more strategic and we need to truly sit and think about how this conversation is playing out on both sides. Don't just think about your part of the conversation, think about the other person. Because when we're talking in real time and in real life, it's unlikely that you are going to see the same deer in the headlights look that I get when the cameras are on and they're like, I don't know, right? But it's really uncomfortable when that happens. And so you've got to think about the other person in the conversation. And I think we skip over that part because we're checking something off our to-do list.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing that I think is a really classic for women, especially, is that, let's say we ask like, hey, Jen, I want to hear about the bubblegum effect, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're thinking and you're about to, but then I fill the gap
Yep.
because it's like, well, you haven't responded. And I call this a powerful pause, and that it's
Mm-hmm.
so important that you let the other person, for women especially, stop talking, let the other person formulate their thought, and then express it. And I think that that is a way, instead of more, it's actually using that pause so that people let them respond
Yeah.
and let them formulate that thought so they can respond. I also use that when I'm not sure what to say. I use
Mm.
that powerful pause to go, okay, where they, it's like the question confused me. I don't want to project. And so instead I'll say, can I ask a clarifying question? I
Mm-hmm.
really want to understand so I can answer this correctly. And then I'll ask what the
Yeah.
clarifying question is. And I'm
Yeah.
not doing it to like throw it back at somebody. Well, I'm going to ask you a question now, but it's like,
Yeah.
I don't understand what you really want.
Right.
And just that, like we said at the beginning. And so one of the things that I think is so important is for people to take that moment to pause, both for themselves and to give that gift to someone else.
Yeah. And when you ask a thoughtful question, you have to give people time to think about the answer. So, for about 20 years, I would go to spring training with the Mariners, and I had a list of questions that would range from 15 to 25 questions. And just about every player got the same questions. It's how I built out content and editorial calendars. And there were always a few in there that they didn't expect, but they weren't terrible. For example, it would be, who would you want to play you in a movie or a TV show? Not who do you think should, but who would you want, right? So now we've created like a lot more options because I couldn't tell you an actress who looked like me. So I was doing it to make this easier. And the guys would sit there, and a few of them knew right away. And a few of the guys would sit there, and you could see the wheels turning. And I would just sit there and smile, and I would nod, and it would be okay. And after a couple of times, and I got a response every time. And once it clicked in their brain, you could see it, right? You can see the wheels turning, you could see it click. Then you got the story. And my photographers in the room with me were really uncomfortable with the silence. Now, they're not the one who's sitting there looking straight into the eyes of the athletes, but they got really uncomfortable. And they said after a couple of these interviews, hey, Jen, maybe you should change the question. And maybe you should change the question to be, what actor looks like them and should play them in the movie? And I'm like, we're not doing that. That's not the purpose of the story that we're telling. And on average, guys, they're sitting there for less than 5 seconds. I'm getting what I need. You just need to sit there. And back to your point, Lynn, when we jump in and fill the gap, you just restarted the awkward factor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you thought it was awkward to sit there for a grand total of 3 seconds, which by the way sounds like this, that's 3 seconds. It gets even more awkward when you jump in, interrupt a train of thought, ask another question, and now I just started that process all over again.
Yeah.
So, yes, there is an art to just being able to sit there, smile, lean in, nod your head, encourage. When somebody's struggling, you can see they're struggling and you can jump in. But until you see that moment, just sit there and invite that response.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would think it would take, I can't even answer that question. If somebody was to answer it ask me,
Yeah.
I'd have to sit there and I've already started going through a catalog of actresses, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would tell you. So, side note, if anybody could play me, I love Reese Witherspoon. She looks nothing like me, but I think Reese Witherspoon is darling, right? I would love it if that was my comp. So, that's kind of where I go. It's like, it could just be the first person that came to mind that I would like. Anyway,
Yeah, but what's cool about
side
that
note.
is that because of the way you asked the question, it actually is more about finding somebody that you feel it would represent your personality and, your
Yeah,
unique.
or it's the one that you watch most often,
Yeah.
right? I
Or
can tell
yeah.
which type of movies you watch. If you tell me Will Ferrell, or if you tell me Vince Vaughn, I know exactly what type of movies you're watching, which is cool because now I just learned something else about you.
There you go. So, why do you think this problem around communication, um, at least in my experience, it's often actually a blind spot in business and also in relationships. Why do you think this is?
Because most people are very polite and you can ask any question you want and you are going to get a response. You can start a conversation and you will probably get some sort of response or reaction. Now, it might not be the best. It might not be the answer that's most helpful or the one that you really need if you've asked that question. But I would say oftentimes our standards are too low for that. We'll take any response, we'll take any interaction and say, okay, I had a conversation. I got the conversation going. I got them to answer a question. Good on me. And there is a part in every relationship where that is the building block that you need.
Yeah.
But that's probably not going far enough when we get into some of the nitty gritty conversations, especially in our personal lives, of how to have the conversation. And there's a vulnerability aspect that we all tend to shy away from. It's the not knowing what the answer to the question is, it's asking
Yeah.
a question and being afraid of no. And what I would say, and Lynn, I know you know this as an interviewer, every time you ask a question, you are putting yourself in a very vulnerable position, whether you think you are or not, because you don't actually know where this is going to go.
Yeah.
I can
That's
have a
true.
pretty good idea that I am asking a question that is going to get me into the flow of the game and of the story of the fourth quarter and this and that. But I cannot control what the other person is going to say. And so I have to be confident enough in the rest of my conversation skills that I can navigate whatever happens next. But you can't be afraid of the unknown in that part of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I think also, I like from my perspective, sometimes when somebody asks me something that I don't know the answer to, um, it bothers me that I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, but now there are times where I can say, I don't have an answer for that. I don't
Yeah.
know. But sometimes I've noticed that, especially when my mother she asked me these things like, how would I ever know this, mom? And I have this almost Pavlov dog's response of like, how would I know this? Because it's happened so many times I get frustrated.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that in other settings, I can just say, I don't know. But that's a
No.
really good question, and I'm going to find out for you.
Yep.
And and then the key thing is finding out and getting back to that person with an answer. But I think there's another side especially when we get into interpersonal relationships, that about conversation and how really having this skill set can improve and help not only the conversation but our relationships.
Yes. And I will also share that we run into this in broadcasting all the time. It's called breaking news. And when we run into breaking news, and there's varying degrees of breaking news, right? It's the player who's injured and we are still waiting for the injury update. Or it's trying to figure out how long a freeway is going to be shut down because there's
Yes.
been, a tanker that's overturned and, they're sending tow trucks and emergency vehicles on the scene. So, our general rule, and I do think that this is helpful because our general rule when breaking news happens, we don't just go off the air. They still come down to me and they still ask what happened. So, you start with what you know, and then you start with the blanks that you still need to fill in. We know he was hurt during this part of the game. We know he was hurt making a tackle on the special teams play. He limped off the field, favoring his right ankle. We know he has gone into the medical tent. We don't know the severity of the injury. We're trying to figure out if he's going to be able to return. And we will give you the medical update as soon as he is out of the tent. So I've got 3 things that I know. I've got 3 things I'm trying to find out. And as you find things out, now you just add those into the things that you know. And then you still leave room for, we don't know what this means for his availability in the second half. We don't know what this means for his availability on special teams. And so when you have that kind of free flowing, okay, I actually know more than I think I do. I need to put together a few observations and I need to kind of use my senses a little bit, but I actually know more than I think I do. So I always have an answer, even if it's not much. And then I know how to spin that conversation to say, and here's what we're trying to find out. And it works in personal situations too, but it just kind of gives you a framework of, okay, here's how we could approach a conversation so that we feel like we are positioning ourselves in a way that we're being helpful, honest, and authentic.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that is, I mean, that's a really good response. I'm going to really sit with this just for my own personal conversations with my mom. I'm telling you. Okay.
Those
So,
are entirely different, though. I am not an expert in those. Those are
Yeah.
entirely different conversations.
but for all our listeners, what should they do next to, if they want, and I hope they do want to improve their conversations?
Well, I would say think about the conversations that you're having ahead of time. Now, not every single conversation during the course of the day, that's just going to be too much and too overwhelming. But you know where you want to make a difference. You know the conversation that always feels like a little sticky. It always feels like, oh man, I don't really want to do this, or this isn't very fun. So look, just think through this conversation ahead of time. And recognize that if conversations can be measured in seconds, not minutes, all I really need to be able to do is have a 90-second exchange with somebody. That is not very much. 60 to 90 seconds is not very much. So let's take the pressure off of thinking that great communication or great conversations have to happen over coffee, happy hour, lunch, a 30-minute meeting, a 20-minute meeting. All of those can be true, but we can start really small and we can just think through and prepare for the conversation and see if that doesn't change your confidence level going in, the response of the person you're talking to. And now we have a little bit of a snowball effect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, it's just sort of like how I handle all the meetings with my team, my clients. I always have an agenda. I
Yeah.
always have a plan, and
Yep.
it's just like, because we need to get through it so that we can and make decisions, not just keep talking about the same thing.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
And
so
for that, I always recommend ETA, Lynn. ETA is my version. I know most people think it stands for estimated time of arrival, and it does. But now, every time you get into a car, I want you to think about this: expectation, timeline, and action item. And
oh,
when we communicate that, and that can be one sentence in every
yeah,
single exchange, now I know that we're on the same page. And now I know that we're going to make a decision because we have already discussed what the expectation is, when this is going to happen in a timeline, and the action item is what are the next steps and who's responsible for those. We tend to communicate one or two parts of that, not all three parts of that. And
yeah.
so we might say, hey, it'd be really nice if you could get me some Q1 reports by Friday.
Well,
Okay.
which reports?
Which reports and by when on Friday? Are you logging off at noon or at 5? Or did you want them by 9 a.m. so you could take a look at them and we could have a meeting? Right. And then we create this unnecessary friction when all we had to do was go one step further and say, could you pull these 2 Q1 reports and get them to me by 10 a.m. on Friday? That's it. Now we have a decision, and now we've moved forward, and now we've got accountability around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I use a lot of EOD, end of day, because I know I want it the next morning. So I just
Oh,
say,
that's interesting.
so it's like, I'll just tell people, you've got until, I want this by, Friday, or let's say I want it Thursday, the 19th, since this is the 18th. at end of day, because then I'll have it all of it when I log in
Yeah.
Friday morning. If I don't look at it Friday night or Thursday night, it's there.
Yeah.
And I don't, my team, I don't care, if they want to work late or, they have pretty flexible hours. I don't care. It's just like I give them end of day and then I get it. I have it ready for me the next morning. So I
I've
have the
always,
time to look
yes.
at it.
I've
But
always
that's
had
just
to
me.
clarify that with people because my end of day sometimes is 11 p.m. and sometimes it's 4 p.m. So I always ask what people's end of day is. But
Yeah. Yeah. I'm basically doing it because I know I want it for the next morning.
yeah,
So now, so Jen, is there anything you wish that I'd asked you that I have not?
I think you covered it pretty well. You allowed me to talk about talking, which is one of my favorite things.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for sharing game-changing conversation strategies, changing the conversation seconds at a time. And the last ETA was brilliant. I hope everyone took notes on that. And I know that our listeners are going to want to know more about you and how they can connect with you and find out more.
Yeah, you can find me on the website, talksportytome.com. That's where I've got all the resources and ways to connect with me. I am very active on LinkedIn and Instagram, Talk Sporty to Me for both of those. Plenty of
Okay.
videos on YouTube as well.
Okay. And I've dropped the website link into the chat for those who are joining us live. And it will be in the show notes for all of you listening to the podcast afterwards. And Jen, thank you again. And for all our listeners, thank you for joining us today. I mean, this has been a really great conversation. I love the ETA. And Jen, thank you again for being here so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Lynn.